In the previous video, I made an infinite fighting game and talked about the game creation process without any specifics. So in this video, I'll go into more details about game creation with code examples. All timecodes are in the description if you are here for specific parts. Quick disclaimer, I am only learning game development and wanted to share what I have learned in the time of working with Godot engine. There can be mistakes that I made because of my lack of knowledge. If my work can be improved, then write down in the comments so I can apply them and I'll make all updates in the pinned comment. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is save system, which allows to create multiple saves, load chosen saves, override them and delete unneeded ones. This part is one of the most important in the whole game. In order to make it work, I created it as a tool that can be found in the node search and added to the scene, where the game data needs to be accessed. Game data node is placed as the first node in the scene tree in order to make game data initialize first. Data for the single save are stored in the form of an array, where all information of upgrades, coins, current wave and game mode are stored. All these save arrays are stored in one bigger array, but chosen save data are stored in the separate variable for easier data access. This method is not the best because with larger amount of data it will take more and more space in the RAM to store it. In the future, it's better to make each save as a separate file. That said, to save data for the future logins, all data need to be stored in the file. That can be done by this function, where it opens or creates a save file, writes in a save data array and closes the file to save it. In order to retrieve data from the file, it can be done by this function, where if save file is present, then retrieved data is written in the save array, but if the save file is not present, then it refers to save data function to create it. My file path is created from the two parts. First is file location, which is in the user data directory. All Godot user data is saved in the system by this path, but directory name refers to the specific project. Second is file name, which can be anything, but I made it as a project name in lowercase and all spaces are replaced with underline, and name ends with data type that I'm storing in the file. As for the file type, I'm using Godot file type.save. Then these two parts are connected in one @ready function. Then, to access and modify data from the script in the chosen save, there needs to be a reference to the game data node, that's in the scene tree. I made a variable in the scene script that has an export attribute to assign node to the variable in the editor. Then by referencing a variable, I access the chosen save array and modify data in it. Then always after data modification, I save data to the file. To print all saves in the new game and continue tab, I made it go through all saves array and instantiate the save button, which is added to the save container. To choose one of the saves, I connected a function which passes save ID. It can be done by this code line. Whether the chosen button's pressed signal, I connected the needed function, but to pass an argument, I added a bind function with an argument. Passing an argument was a nightmare to do because all methods that I found in the internet weren't working, and I stumbled across a solution by accident when I scrolled through the connection function description in Visual Studio Code. Next thing is options. In this part I'll cover not only option structure, but also how I made background music and sound effects. Options have similar structure to game data. All settings are stored in an array and saved in the file in the same way as the game data, where the only difference is file name. Settings are made of two values, name and variable, that represents options value. For music and sound effect on and off, it's boolean. For both volume, it's integer in range from 0 to 8, and for window mode and resolution, it's integer. First, for window mode and resolution select, I used the option button in which I added all values. Then created a function that gets value, saves it and then sets window mode and resolution according to the chosen setting. This function needs to be attached to the item selected signal. Window mode can be changed with this line where the index represents mode. All modes and their values are on the screen. As for the resolution, I'm not entirely sure if it works, but I try to do it by changing project setting size and window stretch scale. With this I need some advice, is this really changing it, or I need to do it differently? If there will be any updates on this, it will be in the pinned comment. Then there is music and sound effects, for which I used sound plugin from Avani Sound. This plugin is locked behind a paywall, which I used to buy with a lot of music and sound effects at Humble Bundle for $20. But even if you don't have this plugin, the following information still can be of use because I will be talking about the check button and slider size change. To turn on and off music and sound effects, I used the check button and got its state from the script to determine is it pressed or not. But the big deal is the fact that its size can be changed if not with the scale change, which comes with its own problems. So to change its size, it's required to make a new texture for standards replacement. Texture size determines check button size. To change button texture, go to Control Theme Overrides icons, where all textures can be set. To change music and sound effect volume, I use the horizontal slider, where I uncheck the scrollable so it doesn't change our mouse scroll. I also set max value to 8 and checked rounded so values are integers. Then I created the functions, which set the respective settings value, and if background music volume was changed, its volume is updated. To hear volume change while dragging the slider. Functions are attached to the slider value change signal. Sliders have the same problem with the size change as the check buttons, and fixed is the same but with one important point. Grabber texture can be changed at the same place as check button textures, but slider basis texture can be changed in the Styles tab under the Icon tab. To do that, click on the slider box and add a new style box texture. Then drag texture in the texture position and in the texture margin set slider size. Music and sound effect volume is determined by this equation on the screen, but if background music is turned off, then its volume is set to -80 decibels. For sound effect it's a little different. To play sound effect I created a separate scene where sound player and timer are present. For each sound effect there is a separate function that plays it by instantiating the player's scene and playing it. Timer is made to self-destroy node after the sound effect ends, but if sound effects are turned off, then the sound effect isn't played. The third thing is how enemies are selected for any given wave. First thing is to find if the current wave is the boss wave, and that's done by dividing with the remainder, where the current wave is divided with the 10, and if remainder is equal to 0, then it's a boss wave. But now about the wave without a boss. Next is to get a minimal and maximal level in the current wave. If the wave is smaller than 3, then minimal and maximal level is 1. But if the wave is greater or equal to 3, the next step is to get maximal level, which is calculated by dividing wave with 3. Then add 1 as a base level and then for every 10 waves add 1 additional level. After max level, the min level is calculated by subtracting max level by 2 if max level is greater than 3, or else it's equal to 1. After getting a level diapason, it's time to add enemies. In the beginning 10 bats were added, as a base. Level for every monster is chosen by around the middle level range that was calculated before. After that additional bats are added, which count is equal to the wave -1. Then for all other enemies, add count differs. It's calculated by dividing current wave with the wave amount required to spawn one enemy. After that, if the add count is greater than 0, it adds enemies. But it's not just appending an enemy to the array. It inserts it in a random position to make any spawn a little random. The same operation is repeated for all other enemies. And that's how normal wave enemies are determined. But now about bosses. As mentioned in the previous video, bosses are the same as their regular enemies, but stronger. That means that there are limited amount of bosses, and after the last boss is defeated, boss loop starts from the beginning. But to make sure that correct boss is spawned, there needs to be done some operations. First is to make sure that it's boss wave, by division with the remainder, mentioned earlier. For waves that are smaller than 70, boss is determined by dividing the wave with 10 and subtracting by 1. But if the wave is greater than 70, then before determining the boss, the wave amount needs to be reduced to be lesser or equal to 70. That's done by getting a multiplier, by dividing the wave with 70. Then wave count is subtracted by an amount equal to 70 multiplied with multiplier. After that, the boss is calculated the same way as before. But in the future I want to change it, to make a random boss appear after all bosses have been defeated. When the boss is determined, minimal and maximal level are calculated, and then boss is added to the spawn list, with the level equal to the minimal level. After that, regular enemies are added, that are the same type as the boss, and their count is equal to the current wave. And last but not least thing in this video is pause in the battle. This thing can be confusing to make, but in reality it's simple and straightforward. In the main scene script, I added a pause variable, which is boolean. Then in the process function I checked if the button assigned to the menu open and close was just pressed and pause is false. If yes, it opens the menu, but to stop player from reacting to the inputs, a paused variable is added in the player script too, which is checked in the process function before inputs check. After opening the menu, pause variable in the main scene script and player script are set to true, which prevents player input check, but that doesn't make enemies stop, so to stop them I made them check if the player is paused, and if it is, then enemies freeze in place. But if the menu is closed by pressing the continue button on keyboard button, then pause variables are set to false, the menu is closed and the battle continues. And that's it for this video. I tried my best to make all these parts as effective as I can, and present them to you. If you have any suggestions how to improve show things, or you have any questions regarding to the things in this video, then write down in the comments. That's it, I'm Ru and see you in the next video where I make a survival game. Bye!